What happens when the most powerful signature in the world is no longer penned by a hand, but activated by a button? This question lies at the heart of a chilling congressional hearing that sought to unravel one of the most significant constitutional questions of the modern era. Accusations flew of a president unfit to serve, a cabal of unelected staffers making critical decisions, and a compliant media that helped perpetuate a fraud on the American people. The controversy centers on the use of the autopen, a tool of convenience that may have become a mechanism for an unprecedented seizure of power. This hearing attempted to pull back the curtain, raising a fundamental question. In the ultimate conflict between loyalty to a leader and allegiance to the nation, what is the moral duty of those who walk the halls of power?
Pleased, I join my colleague from Florida in saying it is time that we have this hearing. All across Tennessee, I hear from people every single week that say, what was really going on in the White House? And why would no one say anything when, with your very own eyes, you could look at any of the footage and see what was transpiring with President Biden? And I think the fact that many of his own cabinet members knew that he was not fit to serve and that there was a cabal behind the curtain who was making all the decisions. It is so offensive to the American people, and it's not something that is a partisan issue. As I talk with Democrats, many of them have lost faith in what they thought was going to be a very moderate Joe Biden administration, and it turned into be the far left Bernie Sanders version of the Democrat Party that was using the auto pen and making decisions and committing our great nation to policies that the American people did not support and would never have supported. And I fully believe that because of that overreach and that flippant attitude that much of his staff had toward the policies of this nation, to people in the administration that chuckled about tossing gold bars off the Titanic. They knew they were going down. They knew they were going to be found out. And they probably knew at some point there would be a hearing like today, and the other side of the dais would be completely empty because no one can defend what they did. Mr. Wold, I want to come to you for a moment and talk about something that was really a disturbing revelation from the Tapper Thompson book. And you know, this is part of the thing. Now we're finding out the media was all a part of the joke. They were part of the ruse. They were part of the fraud that was pushed forward. A Biden staffer told the authors that Biden just had to win and then he could disappear for 4 years. That's all they needed to do. And, you know, it is, the following statement was, he'd only have to show proof of life every once in a while. And as I had a Tennessean say to me when they had actually downloaded this book and read it, and then they said, you know, how stupid do they think we are? And the disrespect this administration showed to the American people. Why is it that the American people appreciate that President Trump goes out and nearly every day is taking questions and answering questions? It's because they have now found out that these staffers were willing to do undemocratic things, as using their term, to keep the president in office, to keep Biden there. They were willing to do undemocratic things, unlawful things. So, Mr. Wold, let's talk about that behavior and how that undermines the faith of Tennesseans and all Americans in our public institutions, because they could see what was happening, but they were being lied to by people in the White House who were probably then running in their office and saying, well, we pulled it off another day.
Yeah, Senator, I mean, this is a theme you've talked about for many years, which is the executive branch is enormous. I mean, there are close to 1,000 employees in the executive office of the president. There are nearly 4 million full-time federal employees throughout the 14 departments that the president oversees. Executive power as accountable to the people of this country really manifests in two ways. The power of the president to remove bureaucrats and to fire them, and to affix his signature to official actions that he undertakes. So when the Washington establishment says something to the effect of, well, democracy dies in darkness, yes, it does when there are staffers, the media, cabinet officials, senior advisors to the president who all create a covering sort of shroud of darkness that obscures who is actually making the decisions. And one other thing I'll just say very quickly, a number of your colleagues on the Democrat side have said, well, there's an OLC opinion here. We don't need to talk anymore. There's an OLC opinion. It says you can use the auto pen. The opening paragraph of that OLC opinion says you can use the auto pen, but only when the president directs that you do so under his decision-making power, right? It is very clear again and again that the president actually has to make the decision. That cannot be delegated to a staffer or an advisor. And there's no indication here that anyone other than staff were making these decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. You know, the visual, sometimes it really is true. A picture speaks louder than words. It's worth 1,000 words. And here, all you have to do is look over at this side of the dais to see that the stone wall continues. I mean, from the party that lied to this nation for 4 years, let's just take a look at some of the things that our colleagues said on the Democrat side when their own Justice Department was concluding that Joe Biden, who, let's not forget, illegally took classified documents and kept them in his garage, in his freezer. I mean, Lord knows where. He just certainly didn't know. Their own Justice Department interviewed the guy and concluded he could not form the requisite mental state to stand trial. He did not have the mental ability to stand trial. And what did our Democrat colleagues say? Vice President Harris says, oh, no. The way that the Hur report characterized the president is so wrong. The president's demeanor is totally fine. Senator Smith, what the Hur said about the president not remembering his son's death, so unfair. Senator Kaine said this is grandstanding. Senator Fetterman said it's just cheap shots. You had other senators saying, Senator Ossoff in February of 2024, saying, and I quote, I found the president to be sharp, focused, impressive, formidable, and effective. In June 2024, Congressman Jeffries insists Biden was, and I'm quoting again, incredibly strong, forceful, and decisive. Where are they now? They don't want to answer for any of those quotes now. They lied to us for 4 years, and we know they lied. They know they lied. It's why they're not here. They don't want to answer a single question. They can't bear to show their faces in public. And you know what? It's right that they can't do that, because the bill of goods they sold this country, they walked this country right into one of the greatest constitutional crises of our history. And now they are afraid to even show up to admit it. These are people, and this is a party that cannot be trusted with power, that cannot be trusted to tell the truth, the most basic truth. They all changed their tunes after Joe Biden debated President Trump, and the whole world could see he couldn't even form a sentence. That running this guy for president again is a form of elder abuse. My, how they changed their tunes after that. Now they can't even show up in public to talk about it. This is embarrassing. But worse than that, it's dangerous. It is dangerous for this country. Mr. Wold, I want to pick up on something you just said a second ago about the OLC and their opinion as to when an auto pen can be used. Just be clear about this. Auto pen means not signed by the person. Auto pen is basically push of a button and it gets signed. OLC says only when the president specifically directs it and it is under his direct authority. Do I basically have that right?
That's correct, Senator.
So based on the facts we know, did that happen in this case with all of the pardons and clemencies and other giveaways that Joe Biden signed?
Assuming that the Biden White House complied with sort of traditional practice of presidential administrations and that there was record keeping either from the staff secretary or others, there should be records to indicate either through covering memorandum or briefing books where the president would have signed his signature authorizing this decision. None of that has come forward. That would be very easy to dispel some of these concerns. And I think what we're seeing here is really the auto pen is best understood as a sort of a tool of executive convenience.
Hold on just a second. You just said something very important. I want to emphasize that. So what you're saying is that there should be, for every time that Biden authorized the auto pen, there should be a record of that. And he should have had to have registered his personal consent to using the auto pen. Is that basically correct?
I think to put it another way, I would say in the policy paper flow to the Oval Office, there should be a record of what documents are presented to the president when he gave his assent to the actions that are listed in those documents, whether it's a judicial nomination or it's a statutory response to Congress.
Well, I think the answer is we need to get those documents. And I just say to our friends in the media over here, you guys need to be asking for those documents, and we need to be asking for them, Mr. Chairman. We need to see those documents. And the president, the former president now, can certainly choose to release them. I'm sure they're part of his personal papers, right, Mr. Wold?
That's correct. And the first place to start would be the staff secretary's office under President Biden.
Oh, here's the trail. If you want to know, if you want an answer to the question, did Joe Biden actually assent to the use of the auto pen, and you think of all the people he pardoned, he granted clemency to, murderers, drug dealers, child rapists. Let's find out, did he actually authorize it? There should be a record of it, is what we've learned today. Thank you for that testimony, Mr. Wold. There should be a record of it. So this is a binary question. It's not, oh, we don't know, gee, it's hard to say. No, actually, we can find out. So right now, today, I call on President Biden, former President Biden and his staff, release the documents. You have them, you know you have them, release them. If what you did is legal, and if you're really not embarrassed about it, and you think it was totally constitutional, release the paper flow. Show us the documents where the president authorized the use of the pen for every single pardon and clemency and stay application. Let's see it. Let's see all of it. And if you won't do it, we should subpoena those documents, and we should find out the truth of who was really running the White House, because I think we can see it was not Joe Biden. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Wold, thanks for your testimony.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want to try to separate policy and politics for a second. I know it's hard to do around this place, but I thought Senator Cornyn made a very good point in his opening remarks. I think Senator Schmidt made the same point that the policy here is very important. And I want to ask you your opinion on the policy. Professor, tell me briefly, I know you can't talk about auto pens, but tell me briefly about the 25th Amendment.
Well, Senator, the 25th Amendment provides the process by which to implement a principle that's in the original Constitution, which is when the president's unable to exercise the powers and duties of the presidency, somebody else exercises them, starting with the vice president. The 25th Amendment sets up a process by which, if there's a question whether the president is able to do that, the vice president and the heads of the executive departments can temporarily basically put the vice president in as acting president, and then Congress ultimately decides the question.
Well, the standard, is it not, Professor? The standard is disability of the president. Is that correct?
Unable to exercise the powers and duties.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's what I would like your opinion on, and the opinion of these two gentlemen here. You have all been staffers. You've worked in government. You've had a boss. In Mr. Spicer's case, his boss was the President of the United States. Let's suppose the President, you were using your experience as a staffer. You were working for the President, any President, hypothetically a President. And let's suppose the President started talking like he was from outer space. Let's suppose the President became fatigued very easily. He couldn't finish a sentence without taking a nap. Let's suppose the president, he was just physically in bad shape, mentally and physically. Mentally, he may or may not have, you're not a doctor, neurodegenerative disease, but physically you can see you could bake a Thanksgiving turkey in the time it takes him to walk across the stage. What is, do you think, as a member of his staff, what do you think is your moral obligation to say, wait a minute, the president can't do the job anymore? I know you're loyal folks. You believe in your president, this president, whichever president. I'm speaking hypothetically. You're loyal. You want to be a good staffer, but you also have a moral obligation. How do you reach that decision, Professor? And I'll go to each of you.
Senator, I think the first thing you would have to do in a situation like that is exercise your own judgment. How serious is this problem? Because everybody has moments when they lose focus, it happens. But if somebody thinks this is a really serious problem, I think the first thing to do is the most difficult, which is to say to the president, because the 25th Amendment also provides that the president can say, I'm unable to exercise the powers and duties of my office.
And suppose the president
That would be extremely
says,
difficult, but I think it should be
look,
done.
trust me, I can. And it's clear to you that he has neurodegenerative disease and he can't. What do? Do you have a moral obligation as a staff member to go to the American people and say, we've got a problem here, it may cost me my career?
Senator, I think at that point you have an obligation to talk to the vice president, who is in charge of the Section 4 process under the 25th Amendment.
What about you, Mr. Wald? You have a moral obligation. I understand you want it to go away, you want to work it out with him, but you can't. When does a staffer have a moral obligation to stand up and say he can't be president anymore, she can't be?
Well, Senator, the 25th Amendment only works if individual staffers or officers of the United States exercise that kind of moral judgment.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, so, I think always, as the professor said, the presidency is an enormous burden, so it would be not one instance, it would have to be several instances of a failure to exercise judgment.
How do you make that decision? You're the staffer, I get it.
Yeah, well, I think it begins with prayer, of course, but after that, I think it's conversation with other staffers, and if you're unable to confront the president or to raise the issue with the vice president, you should resign.
What about you, Mr. Spicer? Do you stand up and do it and tell the truth and run, or do you have a greater obligation to your boss?
Well, luckily I didn't have that problem. But I would say that you have a moral obligation as an American, as a citizen, as a human being. If the leader of the free world cannot conduct themselves to make the decisions that are critical to this country and to the world, you absolutely have a moral obligation to follow the chain of command. And if they don't act, then you must.
Do either of you gentlemen disagree with that? Professor?
Senator, I think acting means talking to the people who have the responsibility or in a position under the Constitution to do something.
You don't
about the
agree with
situation.
Mr. Spicer?
Senator, I'm not sure exactly what he has in mind, other than talking to the people who can make the decision.
I'm just trying to ask. You've all been staffers. Suppose you go to everybody you're supposed to go to, and they all say, "My advice to you is to shut up." Do you have a moral obligation as a staffer to say, "Look, this person can't be president of the United States. It isn't policy. He physically can't do it."
Senator Kennedy, it's not a question of whether a staffer has that obligation. It's whether you as an American have that obligation, and I think each and every one of us does.
Yeah, but you can see it. An American can't. Professor, what do you think?
Senator, I think there are situations under which someone in that position should speak publicly, but I also think that the views of a single individual who is not the person who is constitutionally responsible for taking measures should be considered by the public as just the views of of one individual who has some information about the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tillis.
The scene was as stark as the accusations themselves. One side of the dais filled with Republican senators leveling charges of a constitutional crisis, the other side conspicuously empty. This hearing was not merely political theater. It was framed as an autopsy of a presidency alleged to have been run by shadows. The central characters in this drama were not just the senators present, but also the absent Democrats, the unnamed staffers, and a former president whose cognitive fitness became the subject of national debate. The narrative presented was one of profound deception, where the levers of executive power were allegedly operated by a cabal behind the curtain, a group whose authority was never granted by the electorate. The core of this allegation finds its physical symbol in a simple, yet profoundly significant tool: the Autopin. Senator Josh Hawley's line of questioning transformed the hearing from a forum of grievances into a quasi-legal proceeding. By focusing on the Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, opinion, he established a clear, non-negotiable standard. An Autopin can only be used when the president specifically directs it. This is not a trivial distinction. It is the very essence of executive authority. The witness, Mr. Woe, confirmed the critical consequence of this rule. A paper trail must exist. For every pardon, every clemency grant for murderers and drug dealers, every judicial nomination, there should be a corresponding record of presidential assent. This masterfully shifted the burden of proof. The accusation was no longer an unprovable claim about cognitive decline. It was a direct challenge to produce specific documents from the staff secretary's office. The failure to produce these records, Hawley argued, would be damning evidence that decisions were made without the president's actual conscious approval. This was a tactical masterstroke, turning a political debate into a binary question of evidence. While Hawley prosecuted the procedural case, Senator John Kennedy elevated the inquiry into the realm of ethics. His approach was Socratic, detaching the issue from the specific individuals involved and posing a timeless, universal dilemma. He constructed a hypothetical scenario. What is the moral obligation of a staffer who witnesses the clear and undeniable incapacitation of their boss, the President of the United States? This line of questioning was a powerful rhetorical pivot. It forced the witnesses, and by extension the audience, to confront the profound conflict between personal loyalty and civic duty. Mr. Spice's response was unequivocal. You absolutely have a moral obligation to follow the chain of command. And if they don't act, then you must. He framed it not as a staffer's choice, but as an American's duty. This moment crystallized the central theme of the hearing. It suggested that the true failure was not just a potential procedural breach regarding the Autopin, but a catastrophic moral failure on the part of those closest to power cabinet members, senior advisors, and staffers who chose silence over their constitutional and moral obligations. The senators skillfully wove a narrative of betrayal, citing a book in which a staffer allegedly claimed the goal was for Biden to win, and then he could disappear for 4 years, needing only to show proof of life every once in a while. This quote, whether accurate or not, became the narrative anchor for the claim that the American people were deliberately defrauded. The empty chairs of the Democratic senators became a powerful, silent testament in the eyes of their accusers. To the Republicans, this absence was not a boycott, but an admission of guilt, an inability to defend the indefensible. The hearing, therefore, painted a portrait of a government in crisis, where the fundamental principle of accountable, elected leadership had been subverted. The ultimate question posed at the outset concerning the ultimate obligation of those in power was answered not with a single voice, but with a collection of arguments. The legal argument demands documents. The political argument points to the empty chairs. And the moral argument, articulated so forcefully by Kennedy and Spicer, suggests a profound breach of trust. The hearing concluded that the truth is knowable, locked away in the records of the staff secretary's office. Until those documents are released, the question of who was truly running the White House will remain, a shadow hanging over one of the most tumultuous periods in American political history. What are your thoughts on this matter? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next in-depth analysis.